But yes, Amelie. So in 4th grade, I went to this bougie elementary school, and one day the principal, remember that's spelt with an A because he was our pal, came into the classroom and pulled up the elastic from his underwear for some odd reason. His tighty whities, probably shouldn't remember that detail. And we were kind of stunned. We were in 4th grade, so we were 9, 10 years old. But the reason is because this was 1990, and we were really at the pinnacle of the AIDS crisis. We were at that point where it had become public knowledge. No one could deny it any longer. And so across the board, people had decided that they needed to educate young people about sex. And so his logic was that he said, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. We all have bodies, and showing you my underwear has something to do with that. I set this up for you simply to say that for those of you in here who also grew up in the middle of the AIDS crisis, sex took on somewhat of a very dangerous tone. So this trick or treats theme has nothing to do with Halloween at all. Let me set that up first. It has to do with the adult equivalent of tricks or treats, which to me is STD testing. I'm just saying, I mean, we all know what the treat is, and unfortunately too many of us know what the tricks are. So, you know, in my brain, that 1990s mentality got completely ingrained, but I was in 4th grade then, so I wasn't having sex then. Don't worry, this is not that kind of story. But when I grew older, first having sex at 17, and then later on I would go to the doctor. I was ready. I knew the whole list. I knew everything that I had to get tested for, and it had been ingrained in me since I was 10 years old, so I was ready for it. But this was a decade later, and so I would go and they'd be like, all right, like, what do you need? And I was like, I need a full STD screening. That's right, I'm responsible. They were like, okay, we'll do it for you. And I was like, okay, and they would run down the list and they were like, da-da. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What about Hep C? Hello, that's a really important one. And they were like, well, we don't really do that test that often anymore. Are you a, like, sex worker? It's like, no. They're like, are you an intravenous drug user? And I was like, no. And they're like, so we don't really test for Hep C anymore. I was like, but in 1990, when my elementary school principal came to my classroom and showed me his underwear band, he made it very clear for us that we had to get tested across the board for every STD, and that included Hep C. They were like, okay, well, if you want to, we can add it on. So, I remember the time, you know, I think most people have some sort of very, like, ingrained memory about these moments where you set yourself out there, right? You go to the doctor, or in this case, you go to an STD clinic or a Planned Parenthood, just putting yourself out there, getting ready for taking that STD test. And I remember at this point I had health insurance, and so I went to my OBGYN, and I was like, all right, you know, run me through the tests, I'm ready for it. I'm ready. You always feel like you have to justify your sex life to your doctors. Like, they ask you questions like, do you have multiple partners? You're like, sometimes. You're like, do those multiple partners have sex with other multiple partners? You're like, I don't know. You're like, do you always use protection? Sure. So on this occasion, it was tricks or treats, definitely tricks this time around, because they run all the tests and they come back to me and they're like, all right, you know, you're clear on the big stuff. But there's a new one out there. And I was like, what? And they were like, yes, currently we are testing everyone for HPV. I was like, whoa, my 4th grade principal did not discuss that with us. I don't believe you. And they were like, no, currently that is actually our most pressing concern. And of course, in the end, it turns into this whole hullabaloo that everyone has HPV, and it's nothing really worth being that bothered about because it can be transmitted through your dentist for all that we know. But in the end, I think that we all go to those tests hoping that we get a treat, because we know that tricks are a lot more complicated. Thank you.